Hi everyone, welcome back after lunch. I know it's a bit difficult to kind of speak immediately after lunch. I'm also feeling a bit drowsy, but hopefully through this talk we'll all wake up to the realities of what AI has to offer, right? So I'm Harshit Agrawal. I'm an artist. I work with technology primarily, specifically machine learning, AI, and other emerging technologies like VR, AR. And I've been working with AI actively for over a decade now, kind of making artwork with it, exploring kind of different layers of what it means to live with AI 24/7 now. And it's all kind of packaged under this semi-abstract kind of topic called Do Wires Dream of Veins, to kind of build this parallel between humans and machines and how this kind of relation is evolving. So just to give some context of where I come from, I've had kind of a mixed background between design, technology, and art. I studied at Guwahati for my undergrad and went to the US for my master's, which is where I started really getting interested in the idea of making art with technology. Then I did a bunch of art residencies, worked with Adobe for a few years and Google Arts and Culture, and recently did a residency at Tere Art Futures. All of this to say that in a lot of ways, I took both the red and the blue pill, and now I'm kind of stuck at this intersection of art and technology, for good or the worse. But it's been exciting, and I think with Gen AI tools around the corner, we're all witnessing what this kind of evolution is all about. And in a more serious sense, apart from saying that I'm stuck at this intersection of arts and technology, I think one approach that I've kind of cultivated over the years is what I call as the interdisciplinary approach to both art making and education. So kind of not thinking ourselves as being trapped in one particular discipline, but kind of thinking across disciplines. And now I'll spend some time, I have 30 minutes in total, so maybe about 20 odd minutes, just going through a bunch of projects that I've done, the motivations behind them, and why I think they're relevant today. So this is one of the earlier works that I did, which was a drawing machine with drones. So the idea here is that a person kind of holds a pen and doodles something on a table, but in real time, there is a drone that's kind of drawing or repeating that action at a far off canvas or a remote canvas, right? And the kind of thinking around this was this idea of breaking out of the foundations of the physical limits that a human body has, right? Like using technologies like drones, etc., you could kind of grow out of your human bodily form, and you could potentially create drawings or paintings wherever you wanted, right? And you had ways in which you could manipulate the drone to maybe make the drawings bigger, reverse them, whatever, right? So it was kind of interesting to think of technology as this end effector of sorts that could carry your drawings to different spaces. And then around 2015, when I was working more with physical robots, I also got very interested with the growth that was happening in the visual AI space, right? Around that time, there were papers like Deep Dream that Google had released, which kind of showed that machines could perceive the world around us pretty much as humans can. Like humans and machines were at par in recognizing objects, recognizing different aspects of the world, right? And it became very interesting for me as an artist, what that meant. So I started playing around with that and created this first simple software system where you could doodle something. So what you see on the left is a human input of a drawing, and what most of us would think of as these leafless trees in a deserted land, but what kind of when passed through an AI system, what the AI sees within that is these dogs with large ears. So it's kind of fascinating that instead of a machine just kind of perfecting your circle or something, it's able to start adding imaginative content to your input, right? Which I thought was quite fascinating. So like I was saying, this is kind of the simple software system around this, which is like your regular Microsoft Paint, but on steroids in a certain way, right? Because here you doodle something, like just some random sketch, and then there is an AI system which is trained on about 14 million images. So it's kind of looked at the world pretty much rigorously visually. And because of that training, it kind of takes this as an input and it tries to optimize what it sees within that and kind of keeps going. And remember, like all of this is work from a decade ago. So it's much before like you had your chat GPTs or your mid journeys and so on, right? And it was this kind of fascinating, like peeking inside the mind of an AI system where it interpreted some of those doodles as these vehicle wheels and these like abstract birds and so on, and very dreamlike kind of outputs. So yeah, like continuing kind of that body of work, one question that also like really intrigued me was this kind of loss of agency that we were witnessing in terms of every aspect of human life, right? Like we were witnessing the fact that whatever we purchase is probably not a decision we entirely take on our own. It's recommendation systems on Amazon. The news that you and I see is very different because of the past content that we have consumed, etc. And people were starting to talk about it, but not that much. So like I used art as a way to kind of push that boundary a bit. So here, this work, you start writing something with a pen, like so I write like human is, and then after a few seconds, the machine kind of takes control of my hand. So here now, I'm just holding the pen, and the machine is kind of moving my hand around to write what it thinks in continuation of the input that I started writing with. So it's that kind of transfer of agency, and in this case, not just like digital agency, but like a physical agency transfer, right? And how that's happening is through this magnet plotter system. So there is a 2D magnetic plotter, like a plotter with a magnet attached to it, which is moving under the table, and it's attracting the tip of the pen to kind of move my hand around. And it's, in a way, like, I mean, again, this is like much before ChatGPT, etc. In a way, kind of hinting at this idea that physical control of the human body could maybe let people get drawn into this conversation around what it means to live with AI, right? So this is the kind of like semi-abstract outputs that it would produce. I'll just show one more clearly that I started writing something like freedom of man, and the machine continued with is a myth, what, who is a moral and a nice person of the state to say the truth. So it is like abstract because I particularly trained this AI system on books of poetry and philosophy from a data set of Gutenberg library, which is an open source data of lots of books. But the idea kind of remains this kind of transfer of authority, of creative expression, and how that kind of balance needs to be struck between human and machine. And sometimes, like without realizing, we let go of this and still feel that we are kind of at the center of every interaction that's happening with the machine, right? Because it's all so digital and intangible in a certain way. It's happening behind a screen that you often don't kind of reflect on this loss of agency. So this is a work that I'd shown at Ars Electronica, which is one of the premier like tech art festivals. It happens in Austria every year. And I made a new version of this device like earlier this year, which is much more autonomous in nature. So you could like hold the pen and write something if you want, but otherwise the pen kind of keeps writing these like poetic outputs all by itself continuously, which is also kind of an evolution in the AI technological sphere that we are seeing, right? And this work, like I created these 4 phrases from this human-machine system, which I then made into this large wall work as part of my first solo show of AI art, which was also India's first solo show of AI art held in Calcutta at Imami Art Gallery in 2021. Then moving to the next project that I did, it's called Strange Genders. It's also very interesting project for me personally because a lot of these works are, as you would have kind of noticed, the direction with which I work is both using AI, but also using AI to make some kind of critique around what it means to live with these systems, right? So it's both like exploring the creative potential of what this new possibility of a machine learning on huge amounts of data offers and what insights we can draw from that, but also like what it means to live with these systems. So in this work particularly, I was interested in this idea of like how do people in India think about and represent gender visually. So this was with a couple of other colleagues that we went about collecting drawings of standing male and female forms from different people in Bangalore first and then through an online system during COVID. And these are just some samples of the drawings that people made, which I think in itself is quite fascinating, like these drawings of female and male figures, and then kind of trained an AI system to generate new drawings out of this, but then also trained another AI system to kind of classify the drawings as male, female based on the original data set, right? So now that when the AI produced new outputs, you could pass it through this classification system to kind of get a sense of whether the machine thought these were male or female drawings. And what was fascinating is there was no binary like distinction between the outputs. So the machine kind of produced a spectrum of outputs, which kind of confirms in a certain sense what gender theorists are starting to say about gender being a spectrum, right? So then we created these visual outputs of the work. So here what you'd see as the central figure is this 100% female character generated with machine learning, and on the outermost as it goes is kind of 0% female. And this was also part of the show that I did in 21. So yeah, moving kind of quickly to the next project also, which is called Masked Reality. This is an interactive real-time kind of project. So what happens here is there's this surveillance camera which tracks the faces of the audience standing in front of the system. So it could be one or multiple people, and in real time kind of makes that person into a Thayyam and a Kathakali participant by being trained originally on Thayyam and Kathakali performance forms. And it's interesting here so I did this work in 2018-19, and it's interesting in a multiple kind of like directions is what kind of motivated me to make this work is one, obviously this idea that at least back then the conversation around AI being used for making art was very much kind of a global north, western kind of concept, and there were not a lot of artists from India engaging with that theme actively. So for me, it was pretty much crucial to kind of include kind of art forms or aesthetics that I have seen into this language of AI art making. But also like choosing these two particular like ritual forms or performance forms or storytelling forms was interesting because Thayyam and Kathakali traditionally have had a lot of social divide between who gets to perform each of these, and kind of the patronage that Kathakali enjoys is not the patronage that Thayyam enjoys, and so on. But here, like using the technology of face recognition, which is kind of perpetuating bias further, if you look at cases of predictive policing and so on, could you like instead like flip the narrative and use the same technology and kind of break the divide between these two performances, right? And let everyone see themselves as both these simultaneously. So kind of some motivation around making the work falls from that. So yeah, moving to this next work. This is called The Garden of Digital Delights. It's a long video work that I made a couple of years ago, and it draws very much from this work that that was done around the 1400s by this artist Hieronymus Bosch, which was called The Garden of Earthly Delights. And in certain sense, like I was curious in exploring this concept of what gardens or places of leisure meant today, right? And in some sense, like they've evolved to become digital spaces, like your social media, YouTube, etc., are places that you go to kind of relax and unwind. Like that's the content you consume, and it becomes a space for you to just spend some time and chill in a certain sense, right? But all these places are not devoid of the politics that kind of gets thrown at you through them, right? Or kind of the identities that get enforced in each of these gardens also. So it's very interesting that like even though they might seem like naive platforms, what I wanted to do with this work is to begin with these kind of visuals of the gardens, but then slowly transform them into these spaces of technologies, but then also like as you see the video progress further, you see kind of how these spaces of technologies also trap you into things like filter bubbles, right? Which is this concept of like what I was mentioning earlier, like kind of maybe the news or the feed that I see is very different from what someone else sees, and that's kind of the filter bubbles we each get trapped into. Like they reinforce our ideologies and don't let us kind of think critically about certain concepts that we are so used to consuming. So then these like visual metaphors of democracy or filter bubbles start to play into this video. So yeah, this is kind of a longish video. I wouldn't play the whole thing, but you can see it later. So how this work was also then shown, so this is actually a 4-side cube LED screen, like a 7.5 feet cube LED screen. And there were these 4 gardens that kind of keep moving and keep like showing different consequences of these places, new places of leisure, so to say. So these are the 4 videos to give you a sense. The second garden here talks about also the role of the gardener in maintaining these gardens, right? Like we always think when we talk of AI, we sometimes strip it away from the human labor involved in maintaining spaces of AI, right? Or maintaining these large data sets and the kind of human cost that goes into even like keeping your social media feeds kind of clean and neat, right? Because there's a lot of like violence and gore and whatnot, like kind of content that gets uploaded, but then there's human moderators, content moderators, sitting day in and day out, like taking a lot of psychological trauma in by consuming that and then blocking that out from reaching our feeds. And similarly, just the human cost involved in labeling the data, like because like I said, if a machine is trained on millions and now billions of images, there are people sitting and like tirelessly kind of like drawing out rectangles to mark different regions of the image and labeling them as cat or dog or whatever, right? There's actually a very interesting film that's coming out, Human in the Loop, which has already like gained a lot of attention, which talks about exactly this concept of, and these are mainly workers in what you might call like the global south context, right? So people in India, Philippines, and so on, like hundreds and thousands of people just involved in kind of labeling and marking these, like going through that kind of mental trauma also of cleaning up the internet that you and I consume. So this is the work in its physical form. This is an exhibition view from the India Habitat Center where I presented the work. And it's also very interesting, like kind of this evolving idea of what art means and how it can be showcased to draw in younger audience also, right? Like to become entry points for people to engage more dynamically with it. So things like interactive art, which was the one with masked reality, or here with kind of moving imagery. So it was very fascinating for me to see this like young person spend about 4 or 5 minutes just walking around the cube and trying to figure out what's happening. So yeah, this is one of the works that I wanted to show. Wanted to move on to this next work called Landing Page. So this is a different medium. It's a virtual reality work. So what happens here is you basically experience the work by putting on a headset. And once you put on the headset, you are in this land, which is a poppy plantation. And you slowly kind of move around and realize that this whole space, this whole land is actually made up of tiny videos. So it's like a constructed reality made up of videos. And these videos are all advertisement videos on which most money was spent on Facebook over the course of 2 years. So Facebook, the API of Facebook allows you to kind of get this data, like which ads have given Facebook the most money to be on Facebook. It's fascinating for me. There was a lot of discussion. I was at the other campus yesterday around this term called data colonization. And that's exactly what kind of is the motivation or the inspiration of making this work. And poppy plantations, as you all might know, kind of refers to the colonization methods that were used in India maybe a couple of centuries ago, right? When the Britishers took land as if it were for the taking, like what is called land grab. And then they grew these poppy plantations and earned a lot of revenue from that, which kind of funded their colonization. And today, in very similar spirit, like there is something what is called as data grab, which is like tech companies taking data without the acknowledgement of the people giving away those data, as if it was just for the taking, like it belonged to them. And then like using that data to obviously keep you kind of trapped within these platforms that then keep serving you advertisements that become revenue streams for continuing this kind of data colonization, right? So I created this work with kind of thinking of those concepts, and also just this idea of also like the loss of natural habitat to one of media today, right? It kind of links to the idea of gardens becoming digital spaces of leisure. So yeah, multiple kind of thoughts behind making this work, and it's experienced through a VR headset, like I said. So it gives you kind of that immersion of being trapped in kind of this data land. So one more project that I want to quickly show is what I did recently. It's not a fully completed work, but I was at the Rare Art Futures in Saudi for a residency. The context of Saudi, and also, I mean, to a large extent, the context of India is one of transition, where there's a lot of construction, there's a lot of like change happening, right? And so I made this work, like I started conceptualizing of this work called Data Excavation, the New Soil, where I was using these excavator machines, which are primarily used for construction, as kind of these tools to make kinetic artwork. So installing like lights, LED lights on their arms, and then making them write these words, data and soil, in a continuous loop. So if you, if this plays once more, like you can read, and this is based on obviously the limited motions of these arms. So it writes data initially, and then kind of transforms to write the word soil. And there is this new phrasing, like you probably heard of the phrasing, data is the new oil, but there's this new phrasing of data is the new soil, which I think also holds a lot of value, just as kind of soil offers this possibility of growth and progress. Data does that too, but like the extraction of soil or climate largely led to climate change, and there are a lot of like consequences potentially of extracting data in similar veins, right? So, and oftentimes, like we were discussing, the extraction of data is often so intangible that people don't necessarily notice that. So why not like use the same extraction machines to kind of bring attention to that thought? So here, I then rented out like a couple of excavators in Saudi, and then started like prototyping this work. So I installed these lights, and this is like writing the letters D and S that you see. So kind of like working with the operators there, the excavator operators and so on, and kind of choreographing this. It's also a lot of fun in general, because I've obviously not worked at this scale with these large machines earlier. So this is like then writing all these individual letters with these machines, and then kind of making a composition of that. And at some point, yeah, I'd like to like work with all like the 9 excavators that I need to make the entire composition at once. But this itself, I think, is a nice like kind of showcasing of the work. And also this kind of smaller scale version of this, which is more like an indoor exhibition work, using the toy excavators to kind of keep making this movement in a continuous loop. So yeah, there's one more project that I wanted to quickly show before wrapping up. So apart from making like all these works about AI and kind of the critical aspects of it, there's some playful works that I make too. So this is one around a collaboration with Google Arts and Culture, which was around Matchbox label art of India, which is kind of a visually like very beautiful like pop culture material that India has, and it's somewhat getting lost with industrialization and standard packaging today. But this work kind of is a playful experience in kind of understanding some of the history of that, where also we generate some new Matchbox labels with the same visual language, but here you can go around and play this game of like going to collector bazaars and having this tiny quiz to kind of try and match the right labels and kind of grow a collection of your own. And yeah, like apart from making artworks, I also do a lot of teaching of workshops, etc. Primarily around this idea of like making your own personal AI models, like small scale, with your own data set, and through that understanding kind of the basics of AI and machine learning, because suddenly like we're caught in this generation of like Gen AI tools, right? And suddenly everyone's talking of AI, but just using them as end products, I think misses out on a lot of aspects of how AI actually works, right? Like there's data that goes into a machine and the machine kind of learns patterns from it and then is able to like output new outcomes through that learning. And in this process, there's a lot of like things that can go right and wrong, like based on the data that you feed in. There's a lot of bias that the machines could learn and kind of repeat that bias when you're working with it. So I think it's personally, I think it's very relevant and important to kind of, through making your own tiny like AI models, get a sense of how this like giant machine works, and then be able to make more informed decisions and more like informed engagements with AI in your own works and practice. So yeah, this is another kind of work that I do on a regular basis. So yeah, I'll stop there. This is just a bunch of my projects. There's lots more on my website or like social media handles if you want to check them out. Thank you so much. And